Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on Facebook in the Progressive Vaishnav group. We have our second session of this year's Progressive Vaishnav conference. This is the second year that we've organized it. The conference is entitled Out of the Box. And we have a wonderful session for you with Vrinda Sundari. It's called Tending the Interior Landscape, Practices for Becoming Expert Inner Explorers, Weed Pullers, and Life Lesson Learners. What a great topic. So I'd like to welcome Vrinda Sundari to you all. She's going to deliver a great session. So I'm going to give you a little, first of all, welcome, Vrinda.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'm going to just give a little bit of a background for people who may not be familiar with you. So Vrinda Sundari Devi is a professional certified coach from the International Coaching Federation and a professional transformational coach from Sattva Tov Institute. She's got 10 years of experience in one-on-one and group personal development, and she's a Bhakti yogi of 24 years, director of Harmonist Sanctuary, which is a nonprofit yoga community center in Denver, Colorado, and co-president of ISKCON Denver Temple. So nice to have you here. And I know you've done this presentation many times. I've not heard it, so I'm looking forward to it. And I hope everyone online is looking forward to it too. Please feel free as you tune in to share it with others if you think they'll be interested, and definitely to put some questions in the chat so that we can pick them up later. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really lovely to be here, and I'm a topic that I like to speak about often, as much as I'm invited to. I find it to be the most important, at least for those who are or have been practicing bhakti for some time and have found themselves possibly stagnant or losing a sense of freshness. And so, yeah, I can say that this is important for me because there was a point where I was experiencing that following the four regulative principles, chanting 16 rounds, doing all the practices where I was doing that. And I still found that some of the ways I was behaving or acting or feeling certain parts of me that were not aligning with bhakti. And so I became curious. Isn't it, and I was asking questions, isn't it that our practices are supposed to clean away all the impurities of the heart and regulate the mind and bring it under, tame it, make it our friend? So why am I experiencing excessive challenges? And I really looked at it, and at the time, anyway, I like to have these conversations with my husband. And at the time I went to Chaitanya Charitamrita, and in the Madhya Lila in the 19th chapter, Lord Chaitanya is having a conversation with Rupa Goswami. And Rupa Goswami, he's speaking to Rupa Goswami about the Bhakti Lata, the creeper within the heart, and of course he speaks about the mad elephant, like the creeper is in the garden of the heart, and we need to create a fence, etc. And then he speaks about the weeds. And so what I found really interesting, there are 4 verses specifically focusing on the weeds and how to identify the weeds and pulling the weeds and what the weeds are. And there's some very, very specific things in there. And I started to get more curious to the point where starting to practice personal development, basically getting into that field, because it seemed to relate directly to what's going on internally in the heart, in the mind, in the intelligence, that is an area where it's meant for me to do work. And so yeah, so that's the introduction part. Also, I find this to be very important because I can say that from my experience interacting with devotees, that it's quite common for devotees to also reach this point and to start questioning how effective the chanting really is, right?
Mm,
And I really feel that we're missing, there is a gap, there is a space for this kind of conversation and work.
mm. I think I was going to ask you, I can very much relate. Did you feel in the beginning, before you sort of felt whatever confidence you needed to move and do some personal development, did you sort of feel guilty, like, because many devotees might have told us over the years, like, oh, you're supposed to just, like, all of that's just nonsense, you can bypass all of that, you can just do the chanting. So like, what would tell us a little bit about like some of the steps or the moments along between feeling like that and then actually doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there is some there energy of taboo or judgment with that. And but what I could see is that uh for example, there was a relationship I had, a friendship I had, where I found myself speaking about others in ways that was unnecessary. And
Mm.
I tended to do that with this particular person. There was like a, personality chemistry.
Like a pattern or something, yeah.
Yeah. And I noticed, oh, with this person, that part of me tends to come out and we really start to juice it together.
Mm.
And and I really wanted to work on it. But what I could see that tendency in that relationship to do that, as when I kept doing that, it felt really out of integrity in the other areas of service that I was doing. Because being in a role of leadership means that's misaligned. I have to be clean in how I'm speaking about other people, and I have to be professional.
Mm.
So, mhm.
That's an interesting word you use, professional, because you see, when we're in the devotee bubble, I mean, there's lots of different bubbles. So we might have our work bubble, our devotee bubble, but let's talk about the devotee bubble. We tend to think of like a few things that crossed my mind when you were speaking was, let's say I'm feeling myself, getting into gossip or whatever. And it's not just me, like in the devotee community, let's just say if it seems somewhat prevalent that people are judgmental. Now, even though that isn't actually Krishna consciousness, because you're experiencing it within the Krishna consciousness bubble, it feels like we could say it's a generalization. Devotees are very judgmental because we're encountering it amongst devotees when obviously it's a tendency we all have. But then the thing is, you could go, okay, I'm not going to be like that. And you could go super, what would we call it? Maybe a bit fanatical or a bit sort of like really, me and my friends used to say Ubergestalt. It's like kind of, a bit
Yeah,
super, and that's also got its own problems and difficulties, so it's professional is quite a good word because it sort of means that if I'm in a professional context, I don't have to be a perfect person. I may not be free from all faults, but I know a certain level of behavior that's expected. Do you know
exactly. Yeah,
what I- Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's it. That's something that I realized that I've been practicing for myself. Knowing that when I'm stepping into the arena, interacting with the devotees at the temple or
Mm,
outside of the temple, that that I want to be, yeah, I want to be professional. So, like, even though, yeah, I'm not perfect, I don't show up and, okay, I'm in a leadership role. That means I need to be perfect. No, it means I need to act in a way that's aligned with leadership, like
yeah.
with integrity and leadership. And
Mm,
that's what professional means for me.
yeah.
It also means that I don't cross over
Mm,
certain things. I find that when the crossover areas is when a lot of abuse or unnecessary conflict happens.
yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's interesting, and I feel like in my own experience, um, for to learn what it means to be professional, I think you have to learn that in the world of work. Because, you know, if you don't learn it in the world of work, then I think it can also be, you don't, I've seen it sometimes where I think devotees may endeavor to be what they think is professional without really knowing what the world of work is like. And that also can go a bit funny. So I think it's good life experience to, I guess it's a broader question, to learn from people who are expert in anything, whether they're devotees or not. So in other words, learn from the people who know the thing best, right?
Yeah. 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 Totally. I mean, people know when you go to work, if you act a certain way, then you'll
Not
lose your,
acceptable. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
there are clear lines. I would say even in those environments versus sometimes within the devotee bubble. The
Yeah. And
there.
perhaps it's because a lot of devotees are alternative and they maybe aren't don't naturally align, don't naturally conform, or there's many factors to it. But I think it's I just picked up on it as an interesting word as part of one's maturing in, this context, part of growing up maybe as a devotee.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I found something funny the other day. Someone was saying, someone was saying, a crackhead, they wake up and they're 100% motivated to go get their their
100%.
drugs, you know? And I was thinking that even those that are steeped in all kinds of modes of nature, they have the determination and control.
Yeah.
It's there.
It's all about priorities, I suppose, isn't it? In
Yeah.
one sense.
But still to see, yes, and to see that I can show up with the devotees. I don't need to be perfect, but I can practice determination to be aligned in integrity.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said it as the destination or the intention. It's interesting. I think the people who are the most, well, not necessarily. I was about to say the people that are the most successful in life are the ones who are able to control their emotions and their senses and stuff. And to some extent, that's very true. But there are, it depends what your definition of success, isn't it? Those people can be very efficient and get lots of stuff done, but that isn't necessarily the goal of life either. Um,
Mm,
like I was just thinking, my son is neurodiverse, and he finds it more difficult to do those things, but he's a creative kind of free spirit, and so I guess the thing is just maybe the success is just whatever your circumstance, starting point, set of tools that you do the best you can to make progress.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and related to this topic of the inner landscape, I find that there's where we're at, we start from there. We start from our where we're at in our inner landscape. Our inner landscape is where we're at, what we have to work with, and and from that, everything can come. Like, I don't know if you've seen this before, but they have this three categories: what we can control,
Yes, I know that. Yes, good.
our circle of control, our circle of influence, what we can influence, not control, but influence. And then outside of that, we don't have control or influence, right? So what I find is it's easy for with the influence of the mind, the dual mind, to want to go to those things that we cannot influence or control, or to try to control the things we can't influence.
Mm.
And so we focus so much energy on that, but when we can bring that so much energy of our consciousness goes to those places. But if we turn it in and we look, what can I control? I can actually look at my inner landscape.
Mm.
That's where I can put my energy.
And actually, as I have got older, and also, I guess, longer time thinking about Krishna consciousness, I mean, really, it's kind of, I mean, the expression of the outward is from the inward, but really the real thing is the inner, right? Because the outside stuff is very misleading. It can look like, so many different things, and maybe we have good karma and we can do amazing things, and we think we're doing great, but maybe, so I think it's something that I was going to ask you. I often thought that if you have a map, like especially we have sat nav. So say I have my sat nav on my phone, and I want to go somewhere. It's useless me looking at the map at all unless I know where I am on the map. But often, especially in the earlier parts of our journey, maybe we can definitely, I mean, I'll speak for myself, think that we're way more ahead than we are. Um, and so it's an irony, isn't it? Or it seems like an irony that in order to make progress, at first it might look like I'm going backwards because I'm actually all that's really happening is I'm getting truer to where I really am starting from,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. 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 We have to first understand where we're at in order to know how we can get to where we're going. Yeah. And how do we know where we're at without looking at ourselves, honestly?
Mm,
And, relationships help us also understand, see ourselves, and see where we're at.
mm.
And related to that, seeing seeing in the inner landscape means what's happening with my mind, being able to have the differentiation between the mind and the intelligence, and then even as part of the expansion of the mind, the subtle body, what's happening emotionally. So, to make those distinctions between what's my mind, what's my subtle body, emotional body, and then what's my intelligence, and how am I?
Well, there's a lot there, isn't there? I mean, I mean, even just any one of those things is quite a lot to really.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, c c yeah, I wonder because in the earlier part we sort of or I tried to speak in the first person like um we feel like we understand it because intellectually we understand it and we can repeat it and we can go these are the levels and these are the this and all of that. So many things we can say, but actually to kind of as you were saying, to be really fully conscious of all of these things, and at the same time not get overwhelmed by that,
Hmm.
because like one of the things I do, I suppose everyone does it to some extent, is that there'll be certain things where I'll go, oh, I know that's not ideal, but I go, but I'm gonna let it go because otherwise, like, do you know what I mean? I don't want to. I have to. You've got to. The car has to also keep moving. You know, you can't keep stopping every 2 minutes. You know, kind of thing. So, well, that's stuff. It's an individual choice, but like for because otherwise, I've seen it with your bodies over the years. You may have experienced it yourself, where you can just be always thinking about how far you are from making progress, and that's no good either, because or at least you don't want to stay there. You know, get stuck in that. I think.
Yeah. Well, like the journey itself, devotional service is meant to be executed joyfully.
Yeah.
So the journey itself can be an adventure at every moment. Like Krishna says, adventure at every moment. Self-realization is an adventure at every moment. So we're present with the present moment. We're fully alive in the present moment. Yeah,
Yeah. And so
even
how
on our.
let's say it's a present moment, which is because this is how my mind works. Let's just say I'm totally tuned in to the intelligence, all of these different things. So in theory, then every single time I'm going to make the right choice, right? If I'm conscious of all of those things, I'm always going to make the right choice, but I might not make the right choice. So what do I do if I'm kind of semi-conscious or partly conscious, but I still don't make the right choice? How do I, how do I process that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, in a practical sense, like I like to present practical tools also.
Mm,
So, to help us become more integrated as a whole being, then
mm,
there are certain practices we can do. Like one that I really like to do is as I'm falling asleep at night and as I'm waking up in the morning, I do a check-in. And
mm,
so I check what's happening on three things. I say what's happening, what thoughts are running through my mind, or like what's going on with my mind,
mhm,
what's going on with my emotional body, and
mhm.
what's going on with my physical body. So I check.
Nice.
Sometimes with the physical body, I'll start with my feet and then I'll go all the way up.
Yeah.
And so I'm just it's a mindful bringing the awareness first to the physical body, then to the emotional body, then to the mind. And sometimes I'll write it down, just a check in. But then And then it's like anytime we're practicing something, it's sort of like we're practicing for the real world. So I know in the morning I check in. Sometimes in the middle of the day I'll do a check. I'll do the same thing. And it just helps me practice tuning into those things in a quick way.
And do you
And
find,
so
yeah, I
mhm,
was going to say, do you find doing that regularly that you then become attuned to it? So sometimes you're doing it without realizing it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's also confronting. We have to be ready to, like we were saying earlier, when we're aware of where we're at, it means we're invited to address that.
But certain times, I guess, depending on what you've got on your day or whatever, you might have to pack it up and leave it for later to deal with it, right? Because you can't. Yeah. How would you do? So, give me an example of that. What would you?
Yeah. Well, I like to say it like processing. So I give myself some time to process things.
Mm,
Um, and like some people, they'll go for a walk. Like my husband really, he processes a lot when he goes walking. So he
mm.
likes to walk and process. I like to write. I like to do some sort of creative art thing, and I'm processing that. Or I'll call a friend who is, and I'll let them know, like, can I process something with you?
Just
And
talk it
then,
through, kind of. Oh,
yeah,
is that how you do it? You'd
or
kind of.
write.
Yeah. Sorry.
Mhm. I mean, I have a few friends that are also uh, therapists, coaches, and so we trade off processing things. So we kind of have that. Um, but yeah, but to be able to look at it and say, yeah, I was this morning I woke up and I was really, I feel crunchy around this thing that this person said, and I'm feeling like triggered, and insecure about what they said, and it's reminding me of this. So I'll set it for later. I might make a note, or I'll just,
Mm,
remember that. And then later, I'll write about it, or I'll say, can I process something with you? I talked to a friend,
mm,
or however, to
mm.
to work on that thing. And then often what I find is it's not really about this thing that happened with that person. It's more about this thing in my inner landscape where I still haven't quite uh, come to clarity about my insecurity with this thing. And then further as I work on it, there's so many discoveries in my journey of self-realization that I hadn't seen before. And then that relates to my devotional life because I can see, this has been affecting me in my relationship with Krishna, or how I interact with the devotees or other human beings, or how I think about reality. It's tainted how I thought about reality.
That's such a
So
good
like
point because, and it's interesting too. I think the fear, like sometimes we think of, we talk about like generational cycles and stuff, and parents, maybe parents of a previous generation, they're often, let's talk about the ones who do care and love about their kids, but if they're afraid, and sometimes the way that they'll show it is then it's like, because they're so afraid, they will, um, speak in a certain way, or they'll have a certain way of seeing the world, and we'll pick that all up, right? And then um so when you're saying, and so their fear, one of their fears might be, or one of the audience's fears might be, oh, but if you start thinking about these things so much, then you're just going to be dwelling on them. But actually, maybe, and you'll be able to talk about it better, but my small experience is that by processing them, like you said, you actually move through them and then they have less power. Would that be fair?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes what happens is people maybe don't have the tools or the container or the effective, effective practices for processing. And
Yeah.
therefore there is a sense of dwelling. It feels like a hamster wheel, like we're just spinning and our energy is going into this sort of, like wheel spinning energy going there, nothing happening.
Yeah.
And I can understand that, but yeah, when we're actually processing, then it's we're pulling weeds, we're clearing away what's meant to be cleared.
Yes. So that's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause I
Or-
was just to bring it back to, the context of Krishna consciousness, someone might say, oh, this is all separate stuff. But actually, there's a good point you've made there that, it affects everything, like our interactions, the way we approach life, the way we would think of our relationship with the Supreme and Krishna. So doing this type of work, it's not to say that, the other ways described in scriptures, of cleansing the heart with chanting and everything is not important, but these other things can also help as well. Like they're not separate, right? They're supporting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I really like this analogy of like on the smartphone when we have apps, sometimes you open an app and then you don't swipe it out so it closes and you have, like 10
Or
things
maybe
open,
100.
right? And that's like, why? And why is my phone not functioning? It's like so slow and it's snagging and things. And oh, it's because I have 10 apps open,
Hmm.
right? So it's like in the background, these things are running and they're taking the life energy without us even knowing. And so that the being able to be fully present and conscious, making decisions in a crisp, clear, like clear consciousness way is affected. And actually it is Krishna conscious. This is the amazing thing. If you look in Chaitanya Charitamrita in the 19th chapter, Lord Chaitanya is describing, and because I know there's other analogies of the cleansing the mirror of the heart, and there's descriptions that just by the chanting the heart becomes clean.
Hmm.
And in this section in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's 19th chapter, and it's these few verses, it's 157 to 161. Um, if you read the verses in the purports, you'll see Lord Chaitanya, Srila Prabhupada, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur are all describing that this is an essential part of the process. And it's described that the hearing and chanting sadhana is the watering process for the bhakti lata bij. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that if we're not pulling the weeds, then the watering process actually is watering the weeds, and it's
As
the
well.
cause of
Hmm.
further sense gratification. And Prabhupada describes that we become victimized by the unwanted behaviors because they're actually being watered by what we think is purifying the heart. What we think, if I just keep chanting and
Hmm.
hearing, then it'll clean my heart. Yes, and they're very clear that I will quote it just,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um yeah. So Prabhupada describes in 160, verse 160, the so-called devotee has all this means. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is describing all these ways that one can get victimized by the anarthas or by the unwanted creepers. He's
Hmm.
describing each one. And then Prabhupada says one can become victimized when it says, um, oh, I'm trying to find the exact.
Hmm.
Um, if one does not engage in this okay, one should be very careful to avoid all these unwanted things. Sometimes these unwanted creepers look exactly like the bhakti creeper.
Hmm.
They appear to be of the same size and the same species when they're packed together with the bhakti creeper. But in spite of this, the creepers are called Upashaka. A pure devotee can distinguish between the bhakti creeper and a mundane, and he is very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate. So, and also it's described that without this process, one can get entangled and then further remain in the material world. We're not actually making progress because we're not tending to that landscape.
Hmm.
And I've seen it, and I think we can all see it,
Mhm.
that all these just things that Bhaktisiddhanta describes, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada describes, all these things we can see within our movement. It's happened to devotees that have been practicing for a long time, we see as highly spiritually evolved personalities,
Hmm.
and then there's some behavior, and we think, how can that be?
Yeah.
And I believe like this is how it can be. This is why.
Mm.
Because are we paying attention to the little weeds, but it looks exactly like the Bhakti creeper.
Yeah, and it's hard work. So I not of course it's worthwhile, but it's hard work. So I can sort of see how any of us, we can get a bit lazy, especially if things appear to be going well. So like if let's say whoever the person is, is thinking, well, I know there's these little things and they're not so good really, but the books are going out or the temples are going up or the devotees still seem to think I'm great or whatever it is.
Mm,
You know what I mean? So you would kind of think, well, do you know what I mean? Or you could, and I,
mm,
I think so because it requires quite a diligent for somebody like me who isn't in a big spotlight like that, no one's going to really notice. Like I'm kind of just muddling along doing my best. But if you're like a big person in the spotlight, that's like, yeah, it's I guess it's even more important.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm also reminded of Saint Teresa of Avila, her book, The Interior Castle.
Mm,
She describes that she describes that the soul is like a diamond castle with different mansions,
mm,
and it's looks brilliant and pure, and that there is the outside gate. There's like these different mansions or sort of gates.
here, like stage, yeah, yeah, I know what you mean.
And I think it's the first one that she describes, yeah, that it's like she says many people tend to stay at uh, the first gate or that first boundary, and because she says it's like the externals. So we stay at the externals because
Mm.
um, going inside, there's always risks. Like every time, it takes more courage to go in.
The price.
But she describes how there are um like creatures
Okay.
hanging outside that outer like from the forest. And when we go into that first door, the creatures slip in.
Oh, wow.
I think in different translations, some translations they call them like monsters or like evil
Mm,
things.
mm,
And so that we're supposed to find those creatures and actually identify and get clear before we can actually keep going in. We can't, they're not allowed in, and we're not allowed into the next when
mm,
we continue with those.
mm.
Yeah, but she says it's easy to stay on the external part
Yeah.
and stay at the first.
Well, I guess it's, that there's that verse, isn't it? Like, I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's extremely rare. Like a person who is, fully takes, gives their heart completely, or, it would be very rare, even amongst great sages. So even amongst, if you take a cross section of the people who sort of try to start practicing devotional service within this, we mustn't forget, like within this tiny little part of the people that we are, these tiny, tiny, tiny little segment. Um, that obviously, even within that, the same principle will apply. People will come and at varying degrees, there'll be less and less people who are more and more committed. I think what's I wonder what your thoughts are. Me and one of my friends were talking recently that it seems such an irony that as devotees get a little older and maybe more introspective and maybe more mature, they tend to, from in the apparent sense, drift away from the more formal setups like the temples and whatever. So in the
Mhm.
eyes of the people in the temples, because I remember being one of them, you think, oh, they're out of it, they're this, they're that, whatever. And according to certain set of rules, maybe they are, but actually perhaps they're making progress. So it's kind of like what looks like it's not making progress can be progress.
Mhm.
And the irony also is that the people who are in the temples, now this is a big generalization, so I don't mean it for everybody, but they're often maybe not so much now because there's so many great outreaches of all kinds, but in the traditional system, if a new person comes and they're going to meet potentially the people who are on that kind of Kanishta external level. So in a
Mhm.
way, the people who are most likely to meet people are almost like the worst advertisements
Yeah,
for the process. If you know,
totally.
I
I
mean, that's
do.
maybe a bit a hard thing to say, but I believe it to be true, you know.
Yeah, it's tricky, when when I was first coming to Krishna consciousness, though it wasn't through any of the formal energies of institutional energies. It was a small community in Kansas.
Mm,
And I had that from the very beginning.
yeah,
And
that's
I'm eternally grateful to those devotees because they're just so well-rounded and grounded into their humanity.
mm,
And so it was there were some things that were a bit startling and disturbing when I would go into the institutional or formal spaces.
hmm.
And
Just over the years, like
so it's
Facebook,
interesting.
just like all of that. Apologies, it was Facebook coming through. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do agree. I think, um, yeah, the reality is that the temple spaces are more oriented to form,
Mm,
and that attracts people that maybe need more form.
yeah.
It's good for new people in the sense that, you know, in the beginning we might need to like set aside what our life was and focus on this structure and this form so that it helps us remold ourselves.
Mm,
Um, and then at a certain point, I think we're all called to develop more internally the essence of what that form is representing. And I do see that people can get stuck or stagnant. I think it's a common thing. I've seen that. And even, even devotees that have been practicing for a long time, they can become, like you say, even the worst association because, like we're not meant to take the rules and regulations as an external thing forever. We're meant to internalize and get the essence of it.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it can be, you mentioned at the very beginning, and I thought it was lovely that you were reflected so honestly that, you've started to become a bit discouraged and stuff because I think, you know, other people that I know, devotees and stuff, you can almost get to a point where you, and it's not a nice feeling to have, where you feel like I don't really, and then you have to seek out like association very consciously where you want to find it. And this will be different for everyone, but from my experience was that like sometimes I can feel like, my God, I don't really relate to these people at all. In fact, actually, you know, I, I'm not even sure I really want to be with these people, you know. And that doesn't mean I
Mhm.
don't care about Krishna
Mhm.
consciousness or, but it does force you to start to sort of realize that it's kind of very individual. You have to find the people that inspire you, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. 100%. I find just in within my coaching practice that it's common for devotees to express that. I
Now, isn't
think
that
that,
amazing? That's more common than probably we think, right? Because they might not be saying it publicly.
yeah, and yeah. And this is, and I think that's why for me, I like to speak about these things because in this coaching container, there's like people are sharing pretty much there are themes repeatedly that I'm hearing. And this is one of them is that they don't feel that they can totally relate, but there's this expectation that they should relate. But I mean, when we actually look at it, at any given temple, you can see, especially bigger ones, there are people coming from all different cultures, different countries with different cultures, speaking different languages. Everyone's coming from different backgrounds with different kinds of baggage,
Mm,
and then they all come together, and there's this expectation that we we should all get along,
mm,
even to function in a practical way.
mm.
Then we can. face challenges, and most people aren't getting paid. Like if you go to work, it's like, all right, I do these austerities, I get the paycheck.
True.
Like, I go home and then
Yeah.
I have my own social life, I have my friends. But in the devotee bubble, then we sort of have this pressure that, oh, I need to make friends with these people
Yeah.
because these people are Krishna conscious.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, very good point. It is a big ask with the so many different variables that we're putting together. But I suppose the interesting, what I find is you can't blame or you can't say, oh, it's anyone's fault in a way because it's kind of a collective thing. But what has upset me in recent years is that it appears that, and it may be impossible to or hard to find the original root of it, that a collective culture has represented itself that is being presented almost like here is Krishna consciousness, this is what it is, um, and something doesn't seem right about it. So somebody might think, well, I don't like Krishna consciousness then, but it's not that they don't like Krishna consciousness, but we don't like the way in which it appears to be collectively representing itself in some places.
Yeah. Which is tricky because it's presented in different ways in different places
Of course, yeah.
with different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us
Yeah.
some of the other themes that come out, because I think that might be fascinating for people listening. So if that's one of the themes, what are some of the other common themes?
Oh, that people share
Mm.
in the
Devotees, especially.
yeah. Um, yeah, feeling isolated that they cannot relate, feeling judged is a really big one.
Mm.
And not having a safe place to share
Mm.
what's going on for them internally. And then what I see a lot is just interpersonal conflict. I think that being able to focus on what we can control and being aware of emotional things and whatever baggage we have, whatever beliefs we have, maybe unconscious beliefs about reality, that could be driving the way that we're seeing people. That I think is also a big one. That's a lot of the work that I do within the coaching container is looking at what beliefs do I have about myself, what beliefs do I have about others, about God, about the world,
Mm.
and do I really believe, like, why am I believing that? And it's been tainting. I say tainting, but it's been shaping and directing the way that I interact,
100%.
and right, and then even sort of creates my reality through this belief. And it may not be the reality that I even really want.
No, not at all, especially if it's hurting you, maybe without you realizing it. Um, that's
Yeah.
that's a very interesting one because, well, thank you for sharing those, by the way, because I think hopefully people will really take that in, that maybe if you're feeling like any of those things, it might be a small solace that lots of other people are as well. And it's not uncommon. Um, but that unconscious beliefs about reality, I think one of the things that maybe if we have those things and then we come to think about things as a combination or a cocktail. So I've been thinking quite a bit recently about, like I said, my younger son is neurodiverse, and I think I might be a little bit. And it's kind of like I feel like sometimes maybe I'd love to do a study to see how many devotees are because I think our philosophy, at least in certain ways, can be presented as extremely black and white, very definite. Like this is the way it is. One, two, three, four, five. That's it. And that's all of it. That's all of existence. And it's extremely absolute. And so I have a hunch that certain people are attracted to that by the nature of their beliefs about things. And not to say that, not to in any way say, put shade on the philosophy, but I'm just saying the interaction of us by what we bring when we come to it. Um, and so I think it has, I believe, even in myself, I can see it. It can really cause difficulty in interpersonal relationships when you think everything is so black and white.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, the acharyas are very, very like Srila Prabhupada, the way he speaks is so sure. So sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we're drawn to that, because one way you could see the world is that it's full of unknowns and it's scary and it's all of those things. So you could think, oh, now here's someone who knows and they can tell me exactly how it is. But maybe, I don't know, there's also lots of
Yeah.
mystic saints who are on a path where they're not so definite like that. They're like, no, it's a mystery. It's an inner mystery journey towards the divine, and kind of so. I'm kind of leaning more that way. Not to say that we don't, I'm not that we don't have the form and we don't take the details, but just kind of to me it seems like personally a bit more humble to kind of lean into it with an element of accepting that I really don't know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I can still lean in and I can still, try to understand better. But I just feel it feels more healthy for me than this what could otherwise be a righteous young arrogant git telling everyone how it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I lean in and that humble approach feels very sensitive and open, like listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, sure the Prabhupada he's very sure of himself, and especially I can imagine that maybe with so much of this mystique, there's some hiding in that mist. Like
Yeah, I think he
I
wanted to
think
cut through to kind of,
yeah,
but equally I wonder like perhaps obviously with every tool I take out of the toolbox, there are advantages and disadvantages potentially.
yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because then we see even uh Bhaktivinoda Thakur. For me, I think maybe for others,
Mm.
his writing and his approach has
Oh,
been
nice.
sort of healing for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like in, Prabhupada is just he just cuts through it. I mean, and even more so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur,
Brutal.
and then with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's like this. He's very like I mean, they all are. Srila Prabhupada, I get this humanity, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur is very like he has this sort of really like seeing a broader picture for humanity, and even his prayers they're so vulnerable and real, but and self-reflective about what he's experiencing, and um but yeah, reading his works and reading about his life as was he really healing for me, like healing from some of that cutting energy. I think it's sort of like you said, we can take it as like, oh yes, this is my approach with everyone, right?
Yeah.
And it's cut a lot of people in a way that was not actually helpful.
I think so. Unfortunately, a lot of people imitated it and that idea of like you've taken the and I'm sure like your point will be to encourage others to take personal responsibility to do this work, whereas in the original idea, when for people who maybe did move into a temple, it was like you don't need to do that. Don't worry, your bhakti leader or your temple commander or someone else will do it for you. They'll just like smash it out of you. And unfortunately, so much of that stuff, well intentioned, I'm not, of course, there was never, I'm sure, well, there may have been some misintentions, but generally speaking, um, it was just so damaging. And it's really sad. Okay, we shouldn't get stuck there. But so what I think let's move to what are some of your practical tools and like solutions or techniques or ways that you help people and that you can share with us today to do this.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well, earlier I mentioned that simple check-in with oneself.
Mm.
Yeah, and then I think also looking at my relationship with myself has
Mm.
been very profound for me.
Mm.
Um, I think that this is also a common thing is that we sort of many devotees perhaps there's a sense of self-loathing. Like there's a part of the self that is it's actually the false ego that's self-loathing. Like even you know the song Koda Nitai that
Yes.
where Lord Nityananda, the marketplace of the holy name, Lord Nityananda is so merciful, he's even merciful to those that don't even love their own self.
Wow. So that's
So
actually
there's
stated just like that, yeah.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. That there's that even there's a part of the ego, the false ego that is self-hating. And
Definitely.
so yeah. And so to get to that, I find it so deep and subtle, that part, but to actually go to that place, for me it was revolutionary,
Mm.
where to start to say, no, actually, whatever dialogue is, whatever messaging is happening from that place, I'm not listening to that anymore.
So how did you talk us through that? So that's powerful,
Yeah.
powerful statement, but how would one begin little steps in that direction?
Well, first of all, there's like a trick that happens, I see, that's like, oh, I need to be humble. And to be humble, it means to be self-loathing. So first of all, I just set that aside,
Yeah.
right? Like that's not humility. Let's just like get that set aside. Not humility.
Yeah.
That's not it. And secondly, to to do activities that are bringing the awareness to more clarity around what thoughts and feelings are happening within us, then we start to see them more clearly and differentiate between them and be able to see them. Oh, I'm actually thinking or feeling hate towards myself. Oh, okay. And then when we can see it more, then we can decide, we create a space. We create more space within ourselves where, oh, there's this sort of to myself. I'm gonna make a choice and I'm gonna actually go to that place and say, I understand that you hate yourself, and that's not true. It's
Mm.
not true that I'm like worthless, invaluable, stupid, sinful, you know, dirty thing. That's not true.
Mm.
And like I get where it's coming from, and that's I'm choosing actually to not take that narrative as reality.
Mm.
So some people use affirmations. I like to call them contracts
Mm.
instead of affirmations. So for me, sometimes I'll even, if I find myself going to that place, I like internally the energy shifting to self-hatred or self-doubt, then I'll use a contract or an affirmation and then to remind myself what's real and what's not real.
Can you give us an
Some one,
example of, can you give us an example of one?
yeah, like what for like a practice, here's another practice is you can write all the different things like self-defeating beliefs that I have about myself and write a whole list and take a little time and check in, see how you're feeling, when you write that, and then pause and then sometime later, something that's suggested to give it a day. I go
Mm.
back to that list and write self-affirming truths about myself.
Mm.
And then and to back that up, to remember that the truth is given in the Shastras, it said that every quality, not every quality, Krishna has some special qualities just for him, but just like the sun and the particles, the molecules of the sun are the same quality, the living entities, as part and parcels of the Supreme, have the same qualities. So we're actually composed of all the amazing good qualities that Krishna's composed of.
Yeah.
That's reality. That's reality. So then this whole like idea of like this whole self-loathing part, that's the false ego. It's so close to it.
Why do you think it's so prevalent in religious, slash spiritual um, communities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kali Yuga, it's like you say hypocrisy, which I like to also see it as hypocrisy is kind of like the a flip, like it's described in Bhagavatam that in Kali Yuga, religiosity, like irreligiosity will be presented as religiosity and vice versa.
Mm.
Things get all mixed up and switched around.
Mm.
So we can see that so some of the darkest things happen in the place that's presented as the brightest, but it's not the brightest, it's the darkest. So it's
Mm.
like, where can the darkest thing hide? It can hide behind something
Right.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, but it's everywhere. Like we see everywhere. There's
Well, not even like just I hear you 100%, but I don't mean why do bad happen things happen. I mean, why is it such a common theme amongst religious people to like beat themselves, and go, oh, I'm so wretched, I'm so this, I'm so that. Like, why is that seem to be? It almost seems like some people might feel like it's a legitimate, important part
yeah.
of the path, you know.
It's like one of those things where we read, oh, one should be humble, or we read Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Tagore says, beat the mind with a shoe, and or beat it with a broom in the morning, or the shoe in the morning and the broom at night. And what we imagine then is coming from, you know, we take it if we're coming from tamas, like a tamas consciousness, then we take it in a tamasic way. Oh, so it's like that part of the self sort of takes the narrative of takes the what the shastra is saying or what the acharyas are saying, and it sort of puts it in its own understanding of
Mm,
what we already have, what we're already coming from. And
mm.
so it's that misunderstanding is not just intellectual, it's also like
Yeah, like emotional and everything else. Yeah. Um, it's just interesting that across so many different traditions and whatever that it appears to
yeah,
be.
what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. I think what do I think? Um, I'm not sure. I think it's definitely that if let's just say you and I are standing side by side and I'm not feeling great about myself, but I might compare myself to you or to someone else and go, well, oh, I'm slightly worse or I'm slightly better or whatever. But when you present yourself in front of the supreme perfect person, then maybe that gap appears much bigger, So but I guess then is the crucial bit, I think, which is, do I believe that that person is a judgmental, damning, whatever God, or do I believe that that God is a loving, kind, accepting God who wants me to do well? You know what I mean? I guess that's the bit, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. I think of one devotee who particularly had a very difficult childhood, and most of the male, father figures in their life were abusive and condemning and constantly criticizing and
Mm.
abused them, hurt them. And so, and I can see that they've struggled to accept Krishna as a loving person, and to be able to believe and experience Krishna anything other than those male figures, authority figures, or fatherly figures, has been a struggle for them.
Mm.
So yeah.
Makes sense. Um, I think we're just coming up to around an hour. I think maybe if there's a couple more practical things you could share, that would be very valuable, I think, for devotees. I'll just say Charna, Claire Horsfall, Charna from Australia says hello. There was one, let's see, there was one chap called Manan Karnik, who I presume is from India. He said, "Can you give me diksha?" So I don't know. Maybe you can. I definitely can. I think was being quite enthusiastic. But he must have been enjoying the session. But we don't have any other questions at the moment. I think more people will watch the replay. So perhaps as we kind of, you know, um, start to wrap up, um, I think the things that have stood out for me was that you've shared how important it is as one goes on in spiritual life to have the sadhana part, but also this other these other tools to help you with the inner work and especially to pull the weeds. And you've through your practice given us a really insight into some of the themes that many devotees are experiencing. And you've given us some really great practical tools like these contracts, the starting to learn to recognize and spot the self-loathing when it comes up and kind of work through that. And also getting into a practice of checking in at least twice a day and kind of starting to be more aware of that. Is there anything else that you found really valuable or helpful?
Yeah, specifically recognizing emotions as flags or signals.
Mm,
Um, that's been revolutionary for me and others.
mm,
Um, yeah, because what I've seen also is that, even for devotees in high level management and leadership roles,
mm,
I've even seen people making decisions based on uh based on what's an emotionally driven thing for them,
mm,
and not having the awareness that that's where it's coming from.
mm,
And then there's consequences that happen from that that are that are damaging or destructive. So w for me, I see, and for others, is that when the different emotions come up to create an emotional intelligence, um, like a broad variety of vocabulary, being able to identify and even get really to the minutia, to very clearly and specifically understand what that emotion is, like what specifically what is not just sadness, but sort of like what's a sense when it's like a grieving, a letting go, what's it about, or anger, what's anger about, and to understand that um, each of these emotions are flags for me to go further and look further and get information from, and then utilize that energy uh, as the self, being the self manager, the leader of the self, and directing that energy into a way that's going to be, a win-win for everyone, or progressive for me, in my spiritual life, in my life,
mm,
in my relationships.
mm.
So developing emotional intelligence, that's, I would say, is the
Yeah.
another.
Do you think it's possible to have this kind of mm, integrated, broad kind of holistic approach if you are still very much in, you use the word vocabulary, if you're still very much in, always looking for the vocabulary that we find in the books, like if you're stuck in the vocabulary of the books, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
somebody having a conversation with someone like a devotee, and there's not a single word that's come out of their mouth that isn't almost like from the books. And it's, you know what I'm getting at? So,
Yeah. I don't think, I mean, I have there's great examples like Arjuna in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. He's he's showing self-awareness about what's happening for him physically and emotionally and mentally. And
mm,
he's sharing that with Krishna. He has a high level of emotional intelligence.
yeah.
He's saying, he's describing how I'm shaking, I'm perspiring, I'm
Mm,
thinking about my family members.
mm,
I'm weeping.
mm,
He's showing this a high level of self-awareness. And then when Krishna replies, I think there's, he's not condemning him for being that way. He's condemning him for not then further going forward with that processing and saying, I mean, he's not condemning him, but he's moving him forward. Yes, you're experiencing this, and here's let's broaden the picture, and look at this from another view that I'm coming from. Krishna sharing with him,
Mm.
your soul, your eternal.
Mm.
This is actually a one thing on the broader picture, right? So yes, I do see that there is limitations in if we're only willing to use the the way that the acharyas speak.
Well, what I mean is, to me, it's almost like a sign, and I may be wrong here, of course. I'm just putting, but it's almost like a sign that someone isn't thinking for themselves. Because,
Yeah, it is.
do you know what I mean? So, in other words, what I'm trying to get at is do you think that in order to do some of this work, you almost need to, it might be scary for people, but just let go a little bit to,
Right. Well, I have to.
would
But I
you?
think but I think that letting go, it's like you know, anytime we're letting go, has to be some risk and some stability.
Yeah.
Like like if we are um if we feel stabilized in our practice and we also feel edgy, like, okay, I'm gonna let go of these things, then we can move forward. But um
So it's
we
about
can't
doing it sensibly. You're saying do it sort of, do it responsibly, do it sensibly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like we can't force it. At the same time, we do have to be a little courageous.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I think there are so many devotees that are ready. And sometimes all that has to be said is it's okay to read a book about Saint Teresa. Like,
Yeah.
like read this book and then become like the swan, where you can actually like take that milk out of the water. Where you start to practice, like, yes, you're at the point in your practice now where you understand the difference between the form and the substance. And
Mm.
when you understand the substance, even to a little degree, you can start to find that substance in other places besides the acharyas and Prabhupada said that what's the crusader, the saint who is a crusader, that she should be in the Bhagavatam. That's Bhagavatam.
Oh, Joan of Arc or something? No?
Yeah. Yeah. Like he sees the essence.
Yeah.
He's saying, yeah, that's Bhagavatam, is she could be about in Bhagavatam.
Yeah. I think you need, I always think that when I hear, sometimes devotee quote that thing, we built a house in which the whole world can live. That can only ever be true when we have the supremely broad vision. And whilst we have this kind of vision, it can never be true.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, well, that's wonderful. So what about some first baby steps? Let's say someone's watching this and they're thinking, okay, wow, some really interesting ideas there. Do you have a website, or is there places where they can find things that you share, or where can they follow you, or what would be some small steps they could take to start getting some of this information in their life?
Um, yeah, I actually don't really have an extensive website.
Or maybe just that you share stuff online, or maybe the stuff that you follow that you could point them to. What would be some small things they could do to
I mean,
model?
I love reading books. I
Hmm.
read books, and like I said, use it like a swan. You read it like a swan. You
Any
know,
books that you think
yeah.
you found helpful?
Yeah, there's one book I love about blame. It's called Reframe Your Blame by Joe Visett.
Okay.
Visett.
Yeah.
That one's so good. And or some other personal development. I really like Brene Brown, especially for those that are in leadership. I
Yeah.
find that her books are very, very amazing for those who are in leadership, especially, but anyone really that
Mm,
have responsibilities in life.
mm,
Brene Brown and um, a couple. Oh, if people want to specifically do work with emotions, there are quite a few books now about emotional intelligence. But one that I find really specific, that goes very specific about
mm,
the emotions, is Carla McLaren. She just recently did a fresher edition of The Language of Emotion.
mm,
That one.
mm.
Um, yeah.
Lovely. And so what's wonderful here is what I'm seeing is you're sharing because of the things that you've like essentially you sort of almost at the beginnings told us about your own story. So these are things that have helped you to develop your own bhakti and your own spiritual life. So obviously we're sharing them in that context, and I think it's really encouraging to hear. I mean, I think it's one of those things, isn't it? We need to, it sounds almost silly to say, oh, it's okay to read other books. People might think, well, that's so obvious. But for sometimes it's almost like you need to be given the permission or to
Yeah.
see someone else who's doing it and saying, actually, I find it really helpful. Um, and so it's lovely to, I've seen some of the things you've shared, online here and there, and I can tell that you're doing that work. I could sort of see it,
Okay.
and it's nice. Um, so thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up before you finish?
I really appreciate this conversation with you. I appreciate being able to share. And yeah, if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to email or message or anything
What would
to
be the best way? Would it be Facebook, or what would be the best way for people
yeah,
to?
message to Facebook. People can find me on Facebook and email.
Yeah.
I can maybe put my email.
Afterwards, we can put some things in the chat, yeah, if people want to follow up. Well, thank you so much indeed. Let me go over to our Facebook panel. We'll say goodbye to the people on Facebook for now, and tune in. There's some other great talks coming up later today and tomorrow. So we hope you enjoyed. Please do leave your comments, questions, thoughts. It'd be lovely to read them later on. Thank you.